So good morning. Welcome to the first of this course, what we're calling the Mindful Path. It is, as it says on the website, it is technically a 16-week course, but each class is self-contained. So you don't, a lot of the classes that we do, they will build like one text and it builds. And so if you miss some, it gets difficult. But with this class, the theory is, or the approach is that each class is going to focus on a single positive quality that we can develop. So, of course, the more classes you come to, the more positive qualities that you'll be exposed to. So there's benefit in that. There are recordings, that will be available as well. I do want to be mindful of the fact that, I do want this both, here in person and online. I want it to be a group, discussion, kind of oriented class. It's not a lecture class. It's focused on a meditation for each class and a little bit of setup for the meditation, but then also small group discussion, large group discussion, question and answer, people sharing their challenges with this sort of, what we're talking about. It's, interactive in that sense. It's not a lot of the Tibetan Buddhist pedagogical approach can be just sort of talking for a long time. And that's not what we want to do. We want to have a dynamic, meditative, cooperative experience over these hopefully 16 weeks. It is scheduled for 90 minutes. We may or may not need 90 minutes, so I'm open to, I don't think we'll need more than 90 minutes, but we may not need the full 90 minutes. And then there's always going to be kind of a social hour that people, that the community, and, as we advertise, more things could shift a little bit. These are every other week. So it isn't 16 weeks straight. And we do have these cafe hours that happen after class. And anybody in the community is also just invited just to come to that, just to hang out and talk and, make friends with each other. That's the point of the cafe hours, is to help people just make new friends. That's the point of, being together in community, right, in general. So this class, I would describe it as a blend of a secular approach, in the sense that we won't be talking about karma, enlightenment, bodhisattvas, kind of the aspects of Buddhism that are unique to specifically Buddhism. We will be discussing, as I said, in each class, a specific positive quality or trait that we can cultivate. So when I say it's a blend of secular and inspired by or informed by aspects of Buddhist wisdom, then particularly one way of thinking about that is all of these traits. We, as Westerners, we often think of them as personality traits, right? Oh, that's a humble person. Oh, that's a compassionate person. That's a patient person. We don't really necessarily think of those traits as things that we can train in, things that we can cultivate, that we can develop over time. That is the understanding that you find in Buddhism, right? That right now, today, we may not be so patient. We may struggle. We may be short-tempered. Today's class will be on humility. That's the first of the 16 different positive qualities. We may struggle, with, having arrogance about our abilities, in certain situations. And of course, because we're all just ordinary. So to some degree, we're going to have the opposite trait of all of these 16 traits is going to be present in our minds to some degree because we're ordinary, normal, sentient beings. And so we have some arrogance in our mind. That's typical. We have some self-centeredness. We have the opposite of all of these qualities. And of course, we have the seed in our minds too of these positive qualities. We do have the seed of humility. We do have the seed of compassion, loving kindness, generosity, all of these different positive traits. Um, but the Buddhist understanding of the nature of our mind is that we may be familiar, we may have trained the mind to be familiar presently with some degree of the aspect of this that we don't want, that's not helpful, that causes conflict. But given time, given energy, given effort, we can move in a different direction. Humility isn't some sort of fixed personality trait that you're born with. That you just are. Buddhism would say, well, we come into the world. Again, this isn't. We're not talking about from that, but from the Buddhist perspective, yeah, we can say this person comes naturally. Buddhism will say, well, over past lives, maybe they developed that familiarity, but we can still engage in that. If there's something that doesn't come easily to us, still the mind is such that we can develop it. We can intentionally cultivate it over time, as I said, if we're willing to engage in the work to really transform the mind. But we'll only be in this course transforming the mind in sort of universal positive qualities that may have a role in our spiritual lives, certainly would have a role in a person's spiritual life, but also have a role in our lives as just good citizens, just, family members, husbands, wives. We have, fathers, mothers, friends, just members of society, members of the world. We have, this is all equally beneficial, equally useful for that way of being in the world as well. There will be, and there is presently on the website, it's a long description on the website. If you go all the way to the bottom of the description, there's a link, it says course materials. It's a clickable link. And there will be for each class a reflection, document there, because we have 2 weeks, right? In between each class, we've got 2 weeks. So there will be sort of a worksheet or a series of reflections that you can to integrate what we just talked about over the course of those 2 weeks. And then my hope is that we'll start every class. Of course, I won't call on anyone. I won't ask anyone to share anything they don't want to. There will be no role playing, in this course. I'm not going to do any weird emotional exercises. But you'll have this reflection document, these things. And if people would like to start off the beginning of each successive class by sharing what they use that for and how that worked for them, and then great, we can spend 10, 20 minutes, doing that, talking about that at the beginning of every class. Okay. So are there any process questions, anything like that? People online should be unmuted, so you can just unmute yourself if you have any kind of questions about anything that has been said so far. Yeah. All right, so we'll get started. So I do just want everyone to say their name. If you, I won't call it anyone. So if you don't, I'll skip you. You can be skipped, totally fine. It took me many, many years to be comfortable, with any kind. So fine. But if you would like to say your name, and then what maybe your history at the center is, or why you were interested in this course. So we will start with the people online. Tony, if you would like to unmute. Or we could come back to Tony. So the other person, the iPhone person online, if you would like to
Yeah, my
unmute.
name is Rinchen So. I was born into a Tibetan Buddhist family in Philadelphia. I was named by a Tibetan Lama. I have a quote unquote American nickname, Ronnie. Um, I am in my 60s and I'm only returning to Buddhism now because my career was so busy that all I did was work and take care of family. So I'm on a new journey in my life.
Anyone want to raise their hand in the compa to share? Welcome. We should probably use the microphone. I'm sorry, I didn't. No, for the people online, that's all. Yeah, well, who wants to go next? So there's two buttons. It's complicated. There's a button on the bottom and there's a button on the side. It's a slide and then also a push button. There's a green light. It's for the people online to hear. It takes a couple seconds. Is the green light on? Yeah. Like I said, it's complicated. There's two buttons. Yeah. It's this one here. Um, this one. It took me like a week.
Well, I haven't even learned it yet. You had to show me. My name's David, and I have flirted on the outskirts of Buddhism for most of my life, and I'm at a point in my life today where I want to pursue it more seriously. So that's why I'm here.
I'm Suzanne, and my husband David and I attended the Relics tour back in December 2013 when it came to Santa Fe, and then went into discovering Buddhism in January of 2014. So we did that whole program. And he's been much more involved than me since then, but I dip my toe in every once in a while, and this really appealed to me because I really appreciate the everyday practicality of Buddhist practices and how it enhances my life. So this looked like something that would work really well.
Yeah, I'm David, and I saw the description online and it sounded interesting, and I've been with coming to TNL for about 10 years, and it's kind of good to review the basics once in a while and how to relate with these different ideas, the different, like Venerable said, the humility, loving kindness, all these basic things that we hopefully develop. And just keep working at it.
Hi, I'm Barbara, and I'm just interested in Buddhism, and because I have a lot of friends from Bhutan, and I'm just trying to learn more about the state of Buddhism.
We can just.
Hi, Venerable, it's Tony. Sorry, I'm just finished the meditation class at the spa, and I was tidying up. So, hi, thank you for doing this. Hi, everybody. Hope to see you guys. Ciao, bye.
Okay. So, as I said, today's topic is humility. So, to kind of set up the meditation that we will do, humility from, and again, this is sort of I can't really talk about things outside of a Buddhist context, so I probably can't help myself that I will be kind of using some of that language and some of that, you know, wisdom, some of those teachings, because I don't really have a kind of a psychological background. But humility from the Buddhist perspective is an openness, right? The opposite of humility from the Buddhist perspective, the problematic aspect that we are trying to move away from is not, uh, there can be a confusion between like humility and a well-developed sense of one's capacity, one's qualities, one's potential. And that's a really important distinction, you know, to make. Um, the topic of humility, and of course, you know, I'll just say a few things and then I would like to hear, of course, I would want to hear from everyone else in terms of, you know, their own way of thinking about the topic. Buddhism certainly encourages and requires, to be honest, requires the cultivation of a very well-developed sense of one's own potential. And any spiritual path, I think, is the same because, I mean, even just the idea that I can grow in loving kindness, in compassion, in generosity, that is taking responsibility for something that we often kind of, as I said, we push it off onto this idea of, well, it's a fixed part of my personality, or it's just I've always been this way. I'm short-tempered, or I'm, you know, um, I'm a bit self-centered or whatever it might, like that's just how I am. I've always been that way. The idea that we can be otherwise, the idea that in 10 years, in 20 years, that can shift into something different, that is a radical idea, right? That is tapping into the mind's potential for growth. And every spiritual tradition, even humanism, like secular humanism, you know, tapping into the kind of potential of what it means to be fully human, is going to require that we don't just be satisfied with the degree of patience, the degree of compassion, the degree of, because we all want to be better. We all want to cultivate these states of mind intentionally, gradually, over time. So we're not suggesting that we don't have that capacity, that, oh, it's hopeless. I couldn't possibly. It's beyond me. I'm, there's no way that that's a false humility, right? That's low self-esteem from from this perspective. It isn't, we're not cultivating low self-esteem. We're not trying to cultivate the view of ourselves as not being worthy of, these positive qualities, not being worthy of, being able to have more spaciousness in the mind, to be able to tap into. Really, it's a radical reorientation toward a capacity that is profound. And that depends upon understanding oneself to be capable of that. Um, so when we cultivate humility from this perspective, it is the aspect of it that we're working on is when we are not thinking about our own capacity, but when we are comparing ourselves to others, when we're saying, maybe I do have these skills, or maybe I am good at whatever this is. People depend upon me to do this job, or to, have this ability. And I do that well. I'm complimented on it. People respect my contributions in a particular way. And that's great. That's perfect. There's nothing wrong with that way of thinking. What becomes problematic is when we think on the basis of that, I am better than someone else. I am more than. I am more important than others. I'm putting myself above, I can do this, you can't do this. I am better than you because I see myself as being able to do something that I don't think that you can do. Um, I'm smarter. I have this job title. I can, run faster. I can lift more weight. People attach themselves to all kinds of different labels. They define themselves in different ways. Um, if you're an Olympic athlete, you're probably defining yourself through the lens of being an Olympic athlete. Um, and when so what's problematic in our relationships, in our families, in our spiritual practice is when we think about what skills we have, what roles we have, and then we compare ourselves to others, and we put others in a lower position than how we think of ourselves. That kind of separation is what causes interpersonal conflict, is what leads to, shutting ourselves off from others. So what we're cultivating here is a sense of inquisitiveness, a sense of like, oh, maybe I can do these things, but what can you do? Like, what are you good at? What's your passion? What are you interested in? Um, Going into social situations, conversations with our loved ones from the perspective of being interested, being inquisitive, having a sense of openness about what can I learn from this interaction? What does this person have to teach me? What do they bring to and we can do this, we can practice this all day, every day in whatever job we have, because we're answering the phone, we're dealing with different people who come in, or even just throughout whenever we're going out and about doing our chore, we're at the grocery store, we strike up conversations with checkout person, or, we need help from someone, and instead of just saying, can you tell me where this, what aisle is this on? You say, you start, I'm sorry, I don't know where this is. Could you help me? Then they help you. It's like, well, thank you so much. My name is, what is your name? How long have you, and, you don't want to go on for a long time. They've got a job to do, but you show openness, you show a sense of interest, right? You're showing, you're not just taking, right? You're not just extracting, you're interacting in a way that respects the people that are in front of you. And you can practice that, as I said, all day, every day, as you're just going about your life. And in terms of our spiritual practice too, this sense, whatever our spiritual practice might be, this sense of wonder, this sense of inquisitiveness is also critically important, because we know that we're trying to get from here to there, wherever there is, whether we're here, and we know that down the road we want more of these positive qualities. So from this way of thinking about it, there's an insatiability that is available to us with regard to our spiritual practice that's cut off by thinking about whatever it is that we have achieved. And like, oh, I've studied that before, I've heard that before. Why are they talking? Why is this? I go to a talk. Why are they still talking about, compassion? Why are they still talking? I've read that text. I've heard that teaching. That way of thinking about it shuts us off from the opportunity to look, because I said, the focus here, as I said, is inquisitiveness, a sense of wonder, a sense of receiving, rather than a sense of, just, a sense of learning, rather than a sense of just going through our life or our day, only motivated by how great am I, or this is what I can do, or what can other people do just to meet my needs. And so with regard to our spiritual practice, if we can develop that insatiability, that like, oh, I get to hear a different person teach about compassion. Yeah, sure, I've heard this person and that, but maybe I haven't heard this person, or maybe they're going to present things in a slightly different way. How can I pick up on a new technique or a new way of thinking about this same topic? So in a way, also, as I said, it's a taking responsibility, right? When we are cultivating humility, we're cultivating openness. So it's kind of also on us to reflect and think, well, okay, I'm hearing this teaching, and I have to be responsible for extracting something from it that I find new. Like, how can I apply this? I heard this other teaching, and now I'm hearing this teaching. What's the connection? How do they relate? How can I relate this to a concept that I've never tried to relate it to before? How can I find a connection that is new? Um, so, and you can stretch yourself. You can like do these imaginative exercises where like, what would be hard? What would be difficult for me to relate to this? Like, it doesn't seem connected. It doesn't seem related. Can I sit down for 20 minutes with a pen and brainstorm, come up with like, and just see like what happens with that. And then you can talk with other people, like your friends, about like, oh, I was thinking about this. What do you think, about this? And get their perspective, get their feedback on what you're doing. So the quality of humility is very, it's very vast, it's very profound, but its foundation is a focus, taking the focus in our daily life away from what's comfortable for us. We find our own skills, our own abilities. We find that as kind of a shield, like, oh, this is what I do for a living. This is what I'm good at this. We like thinking about the things that we're naturally good at, the things that we identify. Because if we're bad at something, if you're a bad tennis player, you don't go around saying, oh, I'm a tennis player, right? You don't say, oh yeah, I play tennis, because you've tried it and it didn't go well. And you're like, you're not a tennis player. You don't think of yourself that way. You only think of yourself in terms of the things that you find easy, that you've spent a long time cultivating. You know, you went to school for it, you did it for a long time, you're really comfortable. So we use that as a way of shielding ourselves from being open, from being expansive, from, you know, from being focused and being interested in those around us, to just, this is all about me and my interests. So that's a little bit about kind of the topic, a way of thinking about the topic. Does anyone want to share? I know that you didn't go into the class knowing that it was about humility, but does anybody want to share what their thoughts are when they think about what it's going to mean or what it does mean to develop or train in humility over time? Just anybody wants to just. Your wheels are turning.
First, let me say that I really appreciate what that introduction was, just amazing. Because you've taken humility, and I'm gonna have to listen to the tape. You said there were tapes online after this.
It'll be on YouTube.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna have to really listen to it all again, but there's so much more that there's so many more tangents that are there that would probably be, 6 months worth of study, frankly, from what you said. So I'm grateful. I think that was an amazing presentation. So thank you. One of the things, so many things jumped out at me, but the one thing that I thought you said was, people said, oh, I've heard that compassion thing. I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard about humility. What I've learned in my life, and you mentioned a little bit, like, yeah, I'm not a very good tennis player. Well, that's because you only did it once. You need to go to another teacher. You need to practice every day. And I'll just speak personally that I really started to seriously take meditation in the last 30 days, and I'm way better today than I was. I'm not going to say I'm a great meditator. I've got monkey mind all over, but I'm better 30 days today than I was. And I'm going to come to this lecture, and I'm going to go to others, because it's that repetition. If you want to play a musical instrument, you can't get up one day and try to play it and go, oh, I guess this is not going to work. I tried that. You've got to do it over and over and over. You've got to commit to it. So I don't think it's very different for something like an idea of humility. You've got to practice it. And you got to say, was I humble today? Was I at the grocery store and I got mean because someone bumped into me with their cart, or they got jumped in front of the line, or they've got 15 items and it's only supposed to be 12, and I'm going to get angry, So those are sorts of things that I think we need to practice. And that's what I got from you today. And I really, really appreciate that. And there's so much more than that. You introduced a lot of stuff. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I like the part where you said about the exchange in the grocery store, and you ask someone, where the cheese is or something, and you don't think to engage with them just a little bit, or tell them make sure you tell them to have a nice day. Of course, you're going to automatically say thank you, but will you use that as an opportunity to leave them with something more, and they can get an exchange, deposit something, and that's something that's practical that I think we can, take and like you said, cultivate, the aspects that we'll be discussing over the weeks.
I really appreciate the idea of approaching things and interactions and people with curiosity. I find that that is a great technique, and I use it in my business life, but I forget in my personal life. It really diffuses things. If I can ask another question instead of trying to make myself right, I can learn more about where they're coming from, and we can have a more meaningful interaction, even if we don't agree. So thank you for that reminder.
Anyone online? Okay. So now we will move into the meditation. The meditations are generally going to be about 15 minutes or so in each class. Um, so everyone, is generally in a chair. That's totally fine. If you'd like to move to a cushion, you're welcome to. Totally up to you. You're welcome to do whatever is comfortable. All right. So as we meditate, we do want to think a little bit about our posture, really mainly particularly the back, so we want, because meditation, so another, I mentioned, take a, I'll take like a 2-minute aside before I actually did what I thought I was going to do. Um, so another reason that this course is a blend of secularism and Buddhism is because we're going to be engaging in what's called analytical meditations, which is uniquely Tibetan, really, as an approach. So Tibetan Buddhism is very big on this idea of analytical meditations. There are stabilizing meditations, which everyone's familiar with, most likely. If you were to concentrate on your breath, that would be a stabilizing meditation because you're not intentionally thinking. You're thinking, but it's unintentional, right? So I don't know how much time we want to spend on but meditation from the Tibetan Buddhist perspective, there's always an object of meditation. You always go into a session of meditation having chosen your object. Your object can be the breath. You can say, I'm going to do 10 minutes of focusing on the breath. And that's a stabilizing meditation because there's no conceptuality that is necessary to generate that object. An analytical meditation is different. In analytical meditation, there's a chain of reasoning or a chain of logic that you are going through in order to generate your intended object of meditation. And then once you've generated your intended object of meditation, you focus on that intended object in the same way that you focus on the breath, right? You generate the object and then you hold your mind on the object. It takes time to go through the steps, the analytical steps, the logical steps to generate that object. But then once it's present in the mind, your goal is to hold your mind, hold your attention to that object. If you completely lose the object, you may have to think about there's different ways that distractions are going to influence the process. A small distraction, you might be able to just recover from very quickly. If it's a very emotionally charged distraction, you might be like, I don't even remember what I was meditating on. Like, I don't know, I forgot. And then you have to just you actually have to go back through the steps, right? The analytical steps and generate that again. Because, I'm sorry, what was your name? As David was saying, familiarity, practice, right? We're doing things, for the first time. This might be the first analytical meditation we've done on humility, right? So we're not deeply familiar with it as an analytical topic already. So we have to generate that familiarity in the mind through repetition. And so over time, it gets easier. We can move the mind more quickly back to the intended object. But the first couple of times, we have to just keep trying. So all of the meditations that we'll be doing, there'll be maybe 2 minutes of breathing meditation to kind of give ourselves an on-ramp but all of the meditations are analytical in nature, which is the sort of inner technology that Tibetan Buddhism uses for this process of developing these new habits, these new tendencies, these new ways of thinking. And so meditation, given that it always has an object, given that the goal is inner transformation, it isn't meant to just be a time to relax or, it's deeply restorative in the mind, in the body, but the mind is meant to be alert, it's meant to be sharp, it's meant to be concentrated. And that is something that takes time, like all of this takes time. But the posture is meant to support, to go back to my original point, the posture is meant to support this focused attention. So if we're slouched over, we don't want to do things with our physical body that are going to encourage us to go to sleep. We want to have an upright spine. We want to, do things that support calm, focused attention without moving into drowsiness. So we do have a class here at the center called Meditation 101. We do it, a few times a year, and there's recordings of it as well. That class will give you a little, if you would like, that class will help you kind of think about when mental excitement arises, what are some of the antidotes, and when mental thinking arises, what are some of the antidotes. So we do have that as well. So let's begin by just finding a comfortable upright position. So we do want to think about the back of all of the parts of the position. The straight back is the most important. So we put our hands in the lap, either right over left with the palms facing upward and the thumbs touching, or you can clasp them or rest them on your thighs. You just don't want to have your arms dangling at your sides. Your eyes can be gently closed or slightly open, whatever for you is allowing enough light in so that you stay alert. So we'll take maybe 2 minutes to let go of attending to our environment, to begin to concentrate the mind on the breath, the physical sensation of the in-breath and the out-breath. It is occurring particularly in the opening of the nostrils, breathing naturally, breathing normally, and just noticing whatever physical sensations accompany the in-breath and the out-breath in the space around the opening of the nostrils. And when the mind moves to some other object, we just notice quickly, as quickly as we can. And then without judgment, without frustration, we lift our awareness up from those distractions and we place it gently but firmly, again and again in the breath. in the mind to um, reflect on your motivation for being here. And think what would happen in your own life if that motivation came to pass, if you were successful in accomplishing that goal. How would that positively impact your life, the lives of those around you? Really think about that positive impact, wanting to engage in this meditation so that that positive impact is able to manifest. Bring to mind someone in your life who you feel like is the embodiment of humility. Someone you know, family member, friend, colleague, teacher. I'm trying to think, how does that set this person apart from others that you know? How do they carry themselves? How does their humility influence those around them? What's it like for you to be in their presence? Spend a couple minutes answering these questions. Contrast that experience by thinking about someone that you feel like really struggles with arrogance, seems to always hold themselves above others. And how do I feel in their presence? How does it affect others? Here, the goal is to become familiar with how these two states of mind operate. So I can also think in my own life. Are there times when I can genuinely say I was humble? And how did that feel in the mind? How did that help my interactions with others? I can also think of times when we acknowledge that there was arrogance arising in our minds. And how does that feel in the body, in the mind? How does that impact my relationships with others? Begin to think back over your life, seeing how fluid and changeable it's been. You were once a toddler, once an elementary school student, once a very young adult. How have your interests, your knowledge, your skills changed over the decades? How to cultivate the view of yourself as this dynamic, flexible, changeable person. Always learning, always growing. As this is the antidote to the fixed, static view that arrogance creates. Than to think of the rest of your life. What is it that you don't yet know? Think of all of the potential for growth that remains. All of the ways in which you'll continue to change. Try to foster in your mind a dedication to the ideal of growth. Embracing growth, embracing change is what will prevent that mind of superiority from arising. fix your attention single on a dedication, a resolve to embrace that ideal, that principle, constant growth. What can I learn? Ready? We'll come back together. All right, what I would like to do next is to break up into two groups. We've got two groups of three here, and then the folks on this is one person online. Um, so, and just to do small group discussion about today's class, just what your thoughts were, just to discuss in small groups for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back. All right, does anybody want to share anything as we were just wrapping up the last few minutes? Anybody want to share anything from today? Well, we'll just wrap it up here for today. Seems like 90 minutes might be an appropriate amount of time for the course in general, but so yeah, you're welcome to hang around. We've got, as I said, the community cafe hour, and you can tell your friends they can come to just that. You know, people can, they don't have to come to the class, they can just come to the community cafe hour. That's going to be just after this class, but it's a separate thing. So you can tell your friends to meet you here or whatever. And if you want to just look around the center, you can spend some time just walking around the stupa or what have you. But yeah, so as I said, you go onto the event page in the calendar for today's class, and then you can find that series of reflections, and we can start next week or start in 2 weeks talking about how that goes for people. Thanks for coming.